and the other by Dr. Amanda Odoi, challenging the constitutionality of Ghana's anti-LGBTQI bill, properly so-called the Sexual Human Rights and Family Values Bill. We'll be taking a look at the decision by the court, which says that it will give explanation to its decision latest by Friday. And so we're looking forward to the reasoning. In studio with me is my colleague and head of current affairs production here at Channel One Television and 97.3 City FM, Fred Tete Jabano. Thank you so much, Fred. We'll be going into it, but Jude Mensah Duncan was in court for us. He's joining us live to bring us up to speed with what transpired in court earlier today. Thank you so much for joining us, Jude. Now, the ruling as we have it is that both cases or suits have been dismissed. We know that the reasoning also has been scheduled for Friday. But what led to this dismissal? I'm sure the bench, the judges did mention what led to the arrival of that decision to dismiss these two cases.
All right, Nana, like you rightly said, both cases by private legal practitioner Richard Delasai. For him, his was a human rights case that he brought to the court. Dr. Amanda Odoi was a constitutional case. The court made it clear that once the bill hasn't been assented to by the president, it didn't have the jurisdiction to pronounce any judgment on the matter. So that was by the presiding judge, Justice Lovelace Averill Johnson. And for the Dr. Amanda Odoi case, it was also a similar judgment. It was unanimously dismissed by the 7-member panel. What we know is that the full reasons for the court's decision to dismiss the petition will be made available.
Unfortunately, we seem to have lost Jude there. We'll work the lines to bring him back on so he can speak to us more on how the decision was arrived at, although we know that the reasoning of the court is yet to be made public. But on both cases, the ruling was unanimously decided by the 7-member panel that sat on both cases. Jude Duncan is back. Sorry, Jude, we lost you along the way, but you were telling us about the unanimous decision and the court announcing that it will give its reasoning by Friday. If you can give us more on this.
Yes, so Nana, I was also saying that in the aftermath of the court's decision, the counsels for both teams, that's Dr. Amanda Odoi and Richard Delasai, met with journalists to brief them on their next line of action. So when questions was posed as to what they intended to do next, counsel Kwesi Abedu, who is lead counsel for Richard Delasai, made it clear that they would study the contents of the Supreme Court's decision and they will make their next action known to the media in due course. For Dr. Amanda Odoi, Dr. Ernest Akon, who is lead counsel, also said same, that indeed it's important that they have to go through the court's decision before they determine what their next line of action would be. But all through the proceedings, we also saw some notable persons in society, specifically in academia, also come by to witness the case. Professor Techiwa was also in court, so was Professor Adomako Ampofo was also present in court. And Professor Techiwa, in the aftermath of the case, also expressed her disappointment with the Supreme Court's decision. But she was quite confident that when they go for the review, which Dr. Amanda Odoi is still in the process of discussing with her counsel or with their legal team, they'll come together and decide on what the next line of action will be, whether go for a review or whether to just take the Supreme Court's decision as it is. Now, I also asked counsel for Dr. Amanda Odoi what their next line of action would be in the case whereby the president assents to the Family Values Bill for it reason then to become law. And he was quite clear that they still remain opposed to the bill, they are still fighting the bill, and they will not give up in their efforts to make sure that this bill, that's the Family Values Bill, is thrown out once and for all.
Jude, did you hear the moots about the possibility of a Supreme Court review?
Yes, so it was a major theme in the post judgment conversations with the legal teams. Journalists posed the questions to them as to whether they will be seeking reviews, and both sets of legal teams were quite clear. Their response was that they still have to study the contents or the full judgment from the apex court, after which a decision will be made. But Dr. Ernest Akon, who is lead counsel for Dr. Amanda Odoi, was quite clear when he mentioned that, of course, yes, a review will be sought, and that will determine their next line of action. But I must also add that he was quite confident that in the review process, they should be able to overturn this unanimous decision the court pronounced earlier today.
Very well. Thank you so much, Jude, and good job there. We'll come to you as and when there are updates. Thank you so much. Jude Mensah Duncan reporting from the Supreme Court, which has dismissed 2 suits challenging the constitutionality of the anti-LGBTQI bill. Now, Fred Tejabano is here with me in studio, and so we'll trace back a bit and then bring you events leading to this decision by the court. Fred, this bill and everything surrounded it started somewhere 2021.
Yes. So this thing started somewhere 2021, as you mentioned. It was
right. Fred, hold on for me. I understand Professor Techua is currently speaking to the media from the Supreme Court. So let's go back there and let's hear what she has to say.
First time that it passed the bill the act was challenged. The Constitutional Court ruled against the act. It went back again. This time, they were not challenging the procedural issues. They were challenging the content of the act. Largely, the court let it stand, although it said that some of the provisions were not right. So I hope that our courts learn from each other. They take steps from each other. But we still, as a human rights defender and as somebody who believes in constitutionalism, I take what the Constitution says seriously about protecting the rights of all Ghanaians, about not discriminating against any Ghanaians, So, but mind you, this action was not about the substantive provisions. It was procedural. Yes, so we preserve our rights. When we came to court last year for an injunction, one of the things that was being urged on us by the Chief Justice was, why don't you wait? We have invalidated acts, so wait, let the act be passed. But we thought, still, because the Constitution allows us to bring an action, even at that stage, that we would do that. Now that the Supreme Court says there's nothing wrong with that, it should proceed, we still have options under the act, And
but how hopeful are you? Because there are people who have suggested that, this is a country where 93% of the population have already made it clear that they don't want to have LGBTQ people as their neighbors.
So what are they going to...
Don't you reckon this is a fruitless course?
No, I don't reckon that it is a fruitless course. What you are telling us is that we must legislate intolerance into law. That is a dangerous way to go, because the next time they might say that they don't want burly men like you. And because majoritarian rule or a democracy does not mean just the wishes of the majority. It is also about protecting minorities. So the fact that you do not want an LGBT person as your neighbor does not mean that you're going to send somebody to jail just because the person says that they are gay or lesbian. And then we must pay for their upkeep. No, that is not right. So I do not think that, I think that if we were to take the position that, it is fruitless, then we will really be legitimating tyranny, dictatorship, etc. Last year in Kenya, or earlier this year in Kenya, there was a law about registering organizations. And some LGBT organizations filed to be registered. The Supreme Court decided that even if they have the equivalent of a Section 104 of the Criminal Offences Act in their criminal code, that is an action. But the freedom of association allows even LGBT organizations to be registered. They are not compelling anybody to join them. if you have a club, you are open to your members, right? So this is them. Stay away from them. If you see them engaging in any activities that are against the law, go after them. I think that we need to sort out some things. We confuse pedophilia, a whole lot of things. Pedophilia is a crime. Whoever commits pedophilia, whether they are heterosexual, homosexual, they offend against children. The law should deal with them. Our marriage law talks about marriage between men and women, right? Yeah. Fine. So no two men have gone ahead to say that they should be married. But to say that I cannot defend the right of LGBT persons, you are imposing on my freedom.
How do you respond to the criticism that these sexual minority groups are not necessarily under attack in Ghana, because we have very few cases of the attack?
Have you seen footage of them being banished from traditional areas, of being dragged to chiefs' palaces, and of sheep and other things being cut and poured on their heads? When you banish somebody, when you say that you can no longer live here, that is not an attack. When people extort money from people, when they threaten that they will reveal your identity, that is not attack. What do you understand by attack? I think that there have been enough documented cases of attacks, even without a law in effect. And this is going to embolden all kinds of people, including criminals and hooligans, from taking the law into their own hands. If LGBT people offend the law, deal with them. But to single out a group of people because you don't like their sexual or gender identity, that is what I find abhorrent.
So what are the next steps for you and the entire...
We will wait. The president assents to the bill. What will be your next line of action?
Yeah, so we will wait for the judgment on Friday, as the court has promised. We will wait to see what the president will do. We will advise ourselves. We are not going to stop defending people because there is a law which says we cannot do that.
Are you paying a price for what you're doing? Because
personally, no. I don't think that my reputation has suffered. I do not believe that my family thinks any the less of me, that my friends think any the less of me. No.
I'm speaking in terms of probably attacks or threats to your
security concerns.
Oh, I'm fine. Some people have made threats, but I'm not afraid. I think that as a prudent person, I should know where I would not be welcome, But I actually think that many of us are fearful people to even bring up such things. Okay. And I hope the media will play its role by reading what's in the bill, which would put some of you also under attack, even for reporting issues. How can you have a law which says that even calling for the repeal of that law is an offense? Please read the bill. Thank you.
So, Nana Tufo, Professor Techiwa Menu just engaging the media. She's made a point clear that it's important that this bill be set aside. Now, she made the argument that she represents Dr. Amanda Odoi. She's part of the team of Dr. Amanda Odoi who brought this matter before the Supreme Court. She made it clear that there's a petition specifically targeting the constitutionality of this bill, whereas the other one brought before it by Richard Delasai is or seeks to look at the human rights aspects of the bill. Now, she makes the point that if you go through the bill, there are several infringements on the Constitution. There are several infringements on the Constitution and also infringes on human rights. For each reason, looks at this matter again and sets aside the bill. Question was also posed to her. She made it clear that the legal team will be meeting to put forward their next line of action. She's also already made it clear that they'll be seeking a review of this particular case. So, Nana, Professor Techiwa Menu, you just heard. Prior to that, we also heard counsel for Richard Delasai, Parkwisi Abedu, also speak to the media, where he also made it clear that they still have to look through the full judgment from the Supreme Court, the full reasons for the Supreme Court's judgment, and they would, based on that, determine their next line of action.
All right, thank you so much, Jude, bringing us that interview there with Professor Techiwa Menu. She is a Ghanaian academic, a professor of African Studies at the University of Ghana, Legon, and one of the main opposers to this anti-LGBTQI bill. Earlier, Jude, together with a number of media men, spoke to counsel for Richard Delasai, Pakwesi Abedu. We want to hear what he had to say in response to the decision by the Supreme Court.
Bear in mind that it was a seven-member panel. That's one thing we must bear in mind. A 7-member panel. And going for a review will mean an additional judges. And the question we should ask ourselves is, would that make any difference? So we are yet to advise ourselves on that. So from the word go, you will be against as I said, lead me not into temptation. I've not as yet seen the full reasoning of the court. Who am I to come openly on what next step I'm taking? I believe it is not proper. So please, let's all abide with the timetable of the court. They say latest by this Friday, we'll have the full ruling.
As my colleague said, one thing is certain is that they say it was premature. And on the other hand, the president said all that long that he wanted to wait for the Supreme Court to pronounce itself before signing the bill. Don't you see, isn't it like vicious circle?
You may recall that we filed an application for interlocutory injunction together with our rates. And the Supreme Court indicated that its ruling on that application will be determined together with the rates. We have not as yet seen their pronouncement on that. So please, based upon the content of the judgment, we will know the next step to take. For now, we are not in the position to tell us what next we are doing.
Very well. Counsel for Richard Delasai speaking there, lawyer Pakwesi Abedu. Now, counsel for